And we're kicking off the Squeaky Wheel with another driven conversation. Folks, it is National Ride Sober or Get Pulled Over Week. Now, we probably shouldn't have to remind anybody about that, but please share that message with everybody because we don't need you on the road. It also happens to be National Trail Mix Day. Make sure you reach into that cupboard that's probably got nuts that are probably 8 to 10 years old. Put them in a bag, mix them around with some chocolate chips, and you've got yourself a little bit of a trail mix snack. Which, Lawrence, I guess begs the question, have either of us still eaten pemmican, and was that the original trail mix?
Oh, that was a long time ago we talked about that, eh? But I do believe they do sell it, but I think there's one company that sells pemmican that you can get. But no, I haven't tried it at all.
Well, and it's again, I express this to all of our listeners. If you want to help us market the latest, greatest pemmican mixture, all we ask is 90% of the profits. That's sort of one of the standard clauses when it comes to working with us here on the Squeaky Wheel. We take 90 to 95% of all the profits of any ideas generated.
Yeah, and I think Amber Boyd, who lives here, one of our members, she makes it.
Does she?
Yeah, but I've never tasted any.
All right. Well, prepare to get a phone call from us. Our thoughts are with the families and the people in the Ukraine. It still continues to be a damaging experience over there. The notion of war still continuing to occur. And you'd think we'd be long past that in the way our world has seen it, but I guess history continues to repeat itself.
Well, Russia, I guess their military or I guess they want to bomb from long distance, and I think that's not working out for them quite well.
Yeah, because it seems as though, and it's definitely not working out in the world of the media, because in the end they end up hitting schools and churches and end up a lot of civilians dying. And I don't know what's going to take to get out of this. Everybody has their opinion. I don't know if it's the violence. I don't know what we have to do.
Well, everyone has said it would take them 2 weeks, but it's a little longer than that now.
It's been a lot longer that's been going on. So for all of our Russian listeners, continue to do your part to support nonviolence and continue to speak out against it, because this just doesn't seem to be working. It's not helping anybody. Lawrence, why don't you update us a little bit on the Constitution? Because when are the polling stations going to be coming around? When's the next step of the notion of Métis Constitution?
Well, it's now at a provincial referendum. It's at that step. So now we're looking at the whole month of November of this year. So it's only a few months away, where we're actually going to have polling stations and possibly mail-in ballots. I'm not sure yet. Don't quote me on that. But certainly we're looking at a new chief electoral officer, because we have to hire one of those. And in our bylaws, there's a system for that too, just like a normal election. But now we're just going to adapt a referendum to this.
Just sort of throw that on top.
Yeah, exactly. And then hopefully it's the right person that we can hire that knows about current technology too. If not, then the polling stations will be the format.
Right. And how much information do we need before? Because what is essentially the question? What will people be preparing themselves for?
Well, I think number one, it'll be, do you support this Constitution, this draft that we're giving you? And then that's when they'll do the vote, yes or no.
Okay.
Pretty simple.
But that still allows for us to move forward with continuing to develop it?
No, once that's done, it's final.
That's okay. Well, we have a starting point, because constitutions can be changed. It's just...
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
It can be adapted, years gone by. But this one will be submitted to Canada when we do the process for that framework, self-government.
Doesn't that seem a little bit odd? Shouldn't we be just handing them to the government, saying, hey, friends, here's the way it is.
Yeah, they're not going to decide anything.
Yeah, ultimately.
They won't touch that.
Yeah.
They'll look at it and go, okay, this is...
How can we work together?
This is their government, and this is what they're going to do, yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully we can, again, to me, the biggest part is getting the messaging out. And I know we have been. Leading up to the annual General Assembly, there's been lots of opportunities in order for people to get in and ask questions about the Constitution, read about it. There was handouts, all sorts of information. I guess it's our responsibility at a regional level to make sure that the locals get the information, because as that Constitution, as it gets accepted, as it gets decided on, that will create change for how our process about our Alberta
But, it's up to the regions to get the information to the locals, but the locals have to do their part also.
Right.
Right. And getting to the community as best we can. This is like a whole campaign around either, getting to the polling station. It's not about saying yes or no, but our members have to get there. It's a very, very important document that you're looking at and voting on. And if you need more information, go to www.albertametisgov.com, and you'll see all the information there.
And I think that's, a powerful statement is the fact that regardless of how all of the other things that are happening within locals, within regions, this is going to be a priority. Mm-hmm. We need to focus on this conversation. This speaking point is the Constitution. Yes, we're going to still have questions about COVID that people are going to have. We're still going to have questions about schools and backpacks and opportunities for as we talk about all the health and wellness strategies and all of the sustenance. Those things are going to continue to happen. What we're going to really be talking about in this one specific thing is our constitutional relationship.
Yeah. And we had the debate at the AGA. This is the draft that we agreed on as voting members at the assembly to give to the province now, so we can all say yes or no. Mm-hmm. If you still have disagreements with it, there's still an opportunity for change. It's still in that baby format, that the elders talk about, but it's up to us to start this process going,
Well, again, I think all we can do is continue to share that message, be a part of the conversation here on the Squeaky Wheel, get people listening so that they realize it's their time to go out and vote. Same as any other election that happens. It's your time to step up and go out and vote. The Sansum Trial, where are we at? Because, that's been an awful weight on the families for this violent act that happened against two Métis.
Yeah, they had their sentencing today. The father, because there's two that are...
Father-son.
Yeah, father-son. And the father got, the 2 manslaughter charges, and he found guilty. And then the son now has been certainly charged with second-degree murder as well as manslaughter too. So it's a very interesting time, and even for us, when I was reading the article, what really kind of upset me was the defense lawyers have, when there's an indigenous court, always bring in the fact that they might be suffering from alcoholism or some trauma at home, or something that set those hunters off to murder them or something. And
really,
I don't think a defense lawyer should really be basing that as an argument consistently when there's an indigenous person, when there's indigenous people involved. So, but, the Bilodeau side, maybe they were drunk. Who knows?
Right.
But just to paint it in the media or bringing it up that these guys have a history of alcohol abuse and trauma at home, and how is that related to them being gunned down? I just don't understand that.
It's a bit of a stereotype that, this is one of the things that a defense lawyer or any defense lawyer clings to as a result of having a conversation with the indigenous population.
Yeah, and what it does, it victimizes the whole indigenous people.
Yeah.
First Nations and Métis, it just paints all of us with one brushstroke. And really, I think they should really take their time to look at the actual case and talk about that.
And I guess maybe they just try to make it inflammatory to get people's attention. Again, defense lawyers grab at any possible anything. We need those people to have that role of representation. So we can't vindicate everybody and make them all villains. We do need those people in those roles.
Yeah.
But I'd hate, the terror of having, that hanging over me as a result of my actions.
Yeah.
Again, it's due process, and if you're guilty, you do a crime, you do the time.
Yeah, and it's all about reconciliation too, and the courts have to adapt to that. And then judges and lawyers, they have to understand who is in this courtroom, and understand that when you victimize people about alcohol abuse, you're victimizing everybody across Canada. It's not just inside that courtroom.
Well, and actually that brings up my next conversation point. Justice Michelle Obansawins. She was the recent appointment to the Supreme Court by the Prime Minister's office, and she's the first Indigenous Supreme Court Justice set to take her seat on the bench September 1st. Now, she's an accomplished jurist with expertise in mental health, the Gladue principles, which I'm unfamiliar with, labor and employment law, human rights, privacy law. So it's I can't use the term I'm excited for this. You know, I'm cautious whenever you know, somebody in a new minority role takes a role for the first time.
Yeah.
We really go out of our way to celebrate it. Whoa, look at this. Well, I get it. I do think it needs the acknowledgement, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it should be, you know, more largely celebrated. Her attitude being that she's a justice first, a mother second, an Indigenous person, but the priority being is her commitment to also bringing forth the conversation of Indigenous law.
Well, you know, I celebrate any Indigenous person getting a role.
Okay.
To be quite honest. But at the same time, when you say you're the first, be certain that you say that you're the first.
Oh, good point.
Because I know, as of on paper right now, a Supreme Court justice who was Métis.
Oh.
And served. So, yeah, I almost, and I've seen this time and time again, right? But we do have Métis out there that were just remain hidden.
Right.
We're not pointing fingers.
Right.
But she's definitely one that celebrates her indigeneity. And some of these people have just remained hidden. But
right.
we know as our families that they are sitting in those roles, right?
Boy, that's actually that's a really interesting and important distinction. The notion that, for lack of a better term, let's use the term coming out, which may or may not be offensive or inappropriate in the sense of if you're Indigenous and you're starting that journey, and we talk often about the notion that families used to remain or tell their families, stay hidden, don't bring this forward. But now, and maybe this is just an action of the Liberal government going, let's celebrate, look at what we've done again. Well, if you actually did your research and maybe that's where we have to be cautious of when people go, we're going to say this is the first person. Well, how do we know that? It's okay to acknowledge it, recognize that we have somebody within a role now that has not had a long history of a certain type of inclusion.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's actually really important.
I mean, we can go all the way back to even a Canadian senator in the 1800s being Métis, right? And, you know, Richard Hardesty, for instance, and we know the Hardesty Lougheed family, but that was a Canadian senator in Parliament, and he was an Indigenous man. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like when you say you're the first, make sure you're saying you're the first whatever.
Yeah.
And just be certain and be proud of it.
And this might not even be something that she said.
And it's nothing against her.
Not at all.
It's a heck of an accomplishment to become appointed as Supreme Court Justice, right? And, you know, I assume that she might be Ojibwe or with that name Obamsawin, but or Cree. But I always find that's great. It's a wonderful thing. It should be celebrated.
And it should be celebrated. Yeah, because if they did give her like a participation, welcome to the Supreme Court Justice participation ribbon first, well, you're going to have to go and unpin that and take that off your robe here and try and find the actual person maybe it should be applied to.
Yeah, but if you say you're a first MLA or first MP or whatever, just be certain that the people who didn't identify possibly were in those roles.
Yeah, and recognize them, that there may be people out there who are hidden. Yeah, you're right. That should be important. You know, I tell people I was the first on the squeaky wheel to be more interesting. And now I'm sure there's somebody out there who says it was you. Mm-hmm. Folks, if you're out there and thought that Lawrence was more interesting than me, we need to have a conversation. But I don't want to acknowledge that distinction, Lawrence. I think it's more, you know, you and I are doing the best that we can.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're getting to 100 episodes. I didn't think we'd even get past 20.
No, I thought by now the fighting, or we would be showing up with just black eyes and bloody lips because we've been fighting the whole time. And yet,
we did. We did even a tour, a Squeaky Wheel tour, and none of that stuff got produced.
Yeah, that's right.
But
well, I think some of it. Well, and again,
I think one day maybe we should put that stuff on YouTube. If we have ownership of those those variety shows.
Those variety shows, yeah.
Let's put them on.
Then we do need to get them out there.
Yeah.
You know, and maybe it's not too late. Maybe that's something we should be reaching.
Maybe it's our 100th episode. We unleash all these variety shows that we did. Lloyd and
Medicine Hat and and then the one where you were balancing on top of an elephant and you were throwing juggling at the same time. Okay, we're gonna have to shoot one of those. Now, I don't want this to sound the way it's gonna sound, but the gray in that beard, should we be kicking you off the podcast?
Well, I thought I'd finish off the school. Get to the school year with a beard.
Okay.
I thought the month of August I would grow one.
But it's getting gray.
Oh, yeah.
Are you at risk of being ousted?
It's possible.
From the podcast.
Which I'll probably shave, and then I'll probably, I don't know.
So we'll have to talk to Leighton and everybody behind the scenes, because Lisa Laflamme was gotten rid of from CTV after 35 years because of the gray.
I think she looked beautiful in her gray hair.
I thought she looked absolutely fabulous. I don't exactly know who it is that makes some of these decisions, saying, oh, because this person is not the same, doesn't look the same, or has aged even gracefully, we got to get rid of them. Am I missing something? What's the population out there that is so active that they need to get rid of somebody?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just, I think she was fighting with that Bell executive prior about trips and stuff.
Okay, and I don't dispute that.
I think there was a Pope visit that they were fighting about.
Yeah.
And I think he looked for any reason to turf her, right?
And in that world, at that level, working in that agency, for all I know, that is not unreasonable when it comes to the two different positions, people, and if they're butting heads. But this did seem like what they threw her under the bus for was the gray hair. And I'm like, well, I don't know. What's the best message? Well, we need to try somebody new because you've been on long enough and we're looking to bring in somebody else. But yet that became, the strongest narrative was the gray hair. I'm using that now to try and get rid of Lawrence, and it doesn't seem to be working. But if anybody else has any other suggestions, your hair's almost too dark.
Yeah, it is actually. I get this from my mom, which is great.
Yeah,
because my dad has white hair, and he has that monkey butt in the back too, which I don't have, thank God.
I'm bringing the camera around later. We're gonna have a good long look.
But this is all stress and years of abuse.
Yeah,
right?
From me.
Just kidding.
Yeah.
But no, I find it very interesting how it's gone gray just in the last 3 years. Maybe COVID.
Well, it's not. I often get asked, I'm like, well, Memphis, you must dye your hair because I'm a stage performer and my music and such like that. And first thing I do is I tip my head for it. Look, there's grays coming in. You can see them. For some reason, just up until now, it is still dark. And
I'd be more concerned with you cutting your own hair because that's how it looks.
Well, it's been pretty hot here in the sides, recently. And I think to myself, well, when I walk in there, the young fella's like, how do you want her? Well, take her right down to the wood, right? Like, let's knock this thing down. I need to be cooler is sort of the notion. But yeah, when I see myself from images from the side, yeah, it's pretty thin. Like it gets pretty thin. Whereas if I look at it straight on, it actually is still got a bit of color, bit of depth, bit of darkness. Yeah, I'm doing all right. And I don't know. I can't grow a beard, right, because of work. Working for the fire department. We're not allowed to. And even though I've tried to have a mustache before, I can't seem to ever grow hair right here. It always seems, it's not a good look.
I think it's great for firemen to have beards because, say they're trying to rescue you, someone else to grab onto you when they're carrying you out of a building.
Well, that's going to be my next recommendation. It's a safety thing.
I'm going to write the chief a letter.
Yeah, let him know. RCMP are investigating Fort Chippewan's century-old Catholic church, one of Alberta's oldest, destroyed by a suspicious fire on this last Thursday. The Nativity of the Blessed Virgin Roman Catholic Church, about 280 kilometers north of Fort McMurray on the shores of Lake Athabasca, was gutted by fire. We're working, the government's working, church is working. I don't know the value of burning down a building.
I think it's certainly some member probably wants to sort of, that's his way of erasing, or he or she, of erasing that point of history. But I firmly believe sometimes you got to keep these things intact to educate folks.
Otherwise, you don't have a conversation point.
Yeah, and I know that from what I hear, that site was certainly scheduled for a possible a ground penetrating radar exercise to find some graves, right? So, it's pretty unfortunate for the community, and I think they're all pretty upset with it. Even the Aboriginal community, of course, and it's just it's terrible when you lose something like that at a site, then it just sits empty.
And I think, for me, what's important is that we acknowledge the fact that this created anger. But if it's gone, sometimes the anger we have, we don't know where to place it. Yeah. And you can't be angry at a structure. You can be angry at the notion of what the structure represented.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, the building is simply a building. Repurpose it in a way that builds and continues to develop strength for an individual, for the community, for faith, for the acceptance that we need to, have amongst ourselves. But as soon as that's gone, you've lost that history.
Yeah, like where's the ceremony? Where's the stuff you're working with the community? If you want to bring that building down, bring it down.
Bring it down.
But
work.
do it with protocol and ceremony, and allow the community to really heal from it.
On the other side of the world, where you had these buildings 2,000, thousands of years old that were made of stone. Well, as the relationships of the community changed, some buildings would be taken down, some due to environmental disasters, or some just due to war, and they would take those stones and rebuild.
Yeah.
Once this is burned down, you have nothing to rebuild from. It's just destroyed. If you want to take it down, but figure out a way to acknowledge the history that happened there, and then build something strong from it.
Yeah, exactly. And, I'm all about, if you rename something, put a placard beside it to state the actual history. Mm-hmm. Because eventually people will just forget over time. Mm-hmm. Like, the Reconciliation Bridge here, people will forget it was once the Langevin Bridge. Mm-hmm. And why they changed the name.
Yes.
What was the purpose of it?
And, I like to think that not everybody, though they may have made a poor decision that affected people at a certain time, I like to think that wasn't their full life's intent. They must have done a lot of positive things. And yes, there's a way to acknowledge, and that comes down to it, I guess, is acknowledgement. And Lawrence's Métis Minute moment's coming up here shortly, but this conversation regarding the church leads into the whole point about the history. There was 2 19-year-old hikers who had disappeared, and it was in a remote part of Oregon. But where they disappeared was on Swastika Mountain. Mm-hmm. And the notion that the prominence of this awareness of this mountain is they're trying to figure out, well, who and when was it named? And most people didn't even know there was. Now, they did find the hikers after 9 days. I like to think that our focus was on finding the hikers rather than the cancel culture immediately rushing out to go, we got to change the name of this mountain. I get that, but we should probably find these 2 young hikers first. And now, the indigenous people, the native people are excited about bringing the name back to that landscape. Well, here we are finding something, recognizing that they don't even really know. It must have been, they figured in the late 30s that for some reason or somehow the Geographic Society of Oregon named it, but now they're bringing back into focus the indigenous conversation. Mm-hmm. Well, here we are taking something that was a challenge and bad, and we're moving into a way that's positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's great. The only thing is that, Oregon for us, the Oregon Trail was predominantly Métis that went down there to trade, right? And we have a lot of people, and I think your family comes from that area too. But we crossed, there wasn't a border, so we were back and forth in different ways. And then once they put the medicine line there, then it was U.S. and Canada. But Oregon had a deep meaning to us, as well as Washington. We've traded all the way down to California and back, right, sometimes. So, yeah. But I think it's very distinct that us as American, I'm not American Métis, but there are American ones.
Right.
That are recognized too and part of that process.
Well, and there's a delicious wine down there under the family name, Pambrun, and they have a Pierre Chrysologue, where they have a Chrysologue wine, and it is desperately, excitingly good. And I'm actually headed down to Washington here pretty soon, and I'd like to try and get a couple more bottles.
Thank God you said just Washington, because you don't want to tell everybody where you're going.
Well,
people are looking for
headed
you.
to Seattle as though, or as I call it,
Paparazzi, stay away.
I'm sure that's the indigenous term.
He'll be at the Mariners game anyways.
Oh, yeah. So if you're looking for him, you'll see me at the Mariners game. Lawrence, take us through Lawrence's Métis moment. Give us a little bit of the history of our community, or just a little taste of something that is on your mind that you're aware of that we should all know.
Well, I firmly believe we need to talk about Scrip.
Yes.
And it's not with the T.
No.
It's with just a P only, right? But Scrip was predominantly there to extinguish land title from other First Nations and Métis. And they accomplished a lot in 1885 and displaced many families. But now the Scrip question is with Canada, because if we move into the self-government framework, and the Métis Nation Accord really addresses that Scrip needs to be spoken about, then all these conversations will happen. Mm-hmm. And so, for instance, at the Battle of Batoche, our Métis fighters were all there coming from Western Plains and going up to fight for the Métis. But there was also the Canadian side. And they formed armies and coalitions and different cavalries, and they all went up there too. But for one day of service, you were given that land that was reserved for Scrip for these Métis families. So,
1 day of service.
That's right, in that war.
Wow.
So, when they extinguished the land title from those Métis and the speculators grabbed it, a lot of it was given to those veterans, you could say, that participated in that battle.
And then all of a sudden it's like, well, we've taken this away from you, but there's a road allowance.
That's right.
Over there.
That's right. So you couldn't go back to your original homestead. You had to go and live on these road allowances. And so they call it the largest land swindle in North America. That's what the lawyers are talking about it. But for us, we use it as a basis when we negotiate certainly our path, because once that was taken, our land, we couldn't really comfortably say that this was our land.
Right.
Right. And we're, as Indigenous people, the Section 35 of the Constitution recognizes who they are, but then they have agreements according to their land use, and then they can certainly ascertain that our family's been here. But through the Scrip system, it hasn't been acknowledged yet. So now we're going to go into steps of negotiation to say, yes, my family homesteaded here, and this was our traditional land use. And now the government certainly has to listen to that.
And I don't imagine the government's reaching out to people saying, hey, here's something you're unaware of.
Yeah.
That ends up being one of those challenges.
Yeah, and some of the challenges too, like, when we did, some engagement with community, sometimes ranchers and people who are non-Métis will say, oh, this homestead has been in my family since 1885. And then we go, well, at one time, there might have been an occupation prior to that.
Yeah.
Right? So, we try to make people aware of that certain thing has happened. It's not like we're going to reclaim it from that rancher now.
Right.
Or that farmhand now, but certainly acknowledgement that there might have been a homestead that was there prior.
And again, people can't be afraid of that history, but be a part of the conversation of how it moves forward, because it was obviously, as challenging as it is, and again, you consider over in the Ukraine and Russia war right now, the time is starting to tell how people are reacting. Because someday somebody's going to walk in and squat on a piece of land and go, well, this was mine.
Yeah.
So if you want it back, let's decide how we're going to solve this, either with nonviolence or violence. And Lord knows I don't condone any violence. So the idea that we can start having conversation is definitely going to help. Mm-hmm. The 52% of doctors, and I think this was the Canadian Medical Association, are reporting burnout. How do we protect this most valuable resource? We have, is it us as citizens? Do we need the direction from the province to say, we need to continue to protect our health community. And I don't know, I mean, if you want to go down the different political groups, some will promise you everything. Others will promise you just enough to try and get their vote. But we need to come up with strategies, and maybe this means we have to listen more to what the physicians need, because in a lot of cases, it isn't about money. It's that there's not enough support for them, and we're overburdening them. But it's frightening. There's a lot of communities out there right now that have lost their physician, or Airdrie, for example, it's back to being 24 hours, but they had, on the weekends after, I think it was 7 o'clock, they didn't have an emergency physician.
Yeah. And, I think it's staffing shortages, but why is that shortage there? That needs to be addressed. Mm-hmm. And whether if it's mandated that people need to be vaccinated and then they didn't want to get it, maybe that's a reason. Mm-hmm. Or and then could be burnout too, because my colleagues isn't there anymore.
Right.
And all of a sudden I got to take that burden.
Yeah.
Right.
And the burden of healthcare doesn't end, right? It's not like, oh, good, it's the end of the work week. We're fine until Monday again. No,
and then more and more people are getting sick because of this added, virus. That doesn't help either.
And that anxiety and that stress needs to seemingly be placed someplace. And it's hard to explain to people. And I live in the world of emergency decisions and emergency actions, and stressful. I'm often reminded that I'm in nothing but the most stressful position, not the rock and roll one, not the music, but in the fire department. The idea that not everybody's aware that it's not your emergency. We're there to help.
Yeah.
But that is their emergency. But many, just like physicians, you'll carry some of that burden, and it shouldn't be your burden to carry. So we need to figure out a way to lighten that load for these individuals and let them know that they are a valued part of our community.
Yeah. And, we're seeing that at airports now, and that might not be relief for quite a while, either. So if you are traveling, you got to be prepared to sit and wait.
Yeah, you have to be prepared. Blue Jays are on a tear, Lawrence. Let's finish off with the Blue Jays and how are we going to get them to the playoffs?
Well, you keep George Springer on the field.
On the health, yeah.
On the field,
that doesn't hurt.
Because people are calling him Mr. Clutch now, right?
Yeah.
But it is true. He leads off, and all of a sudden he starts the game with a bang, right?
And we're winning games because of good pitching, and we just swept the Red Sox. Like, it's fun to be watching baseball again. And the other sports, they're going to start coming in, but yeah, that's the sport.
But I always question Blue Jays pitching. But that's just me. I think that's been around since they started.
We're essentially the pseudo team captains and managers. Like,
yeah, that's right.
I haven't gotten any emails, but I'm pretty sure they're interested in our opinion on what they should be doing.
Well, give us Okotoks, see what happens.
That's right. We'll coach one of the smaller local teams here.
That's right.
And be a part of that. From all of us here at the Squeaky Wheel, from everybody behind the scenes, from all the artists, to all the friends, to all the families, to all of our to community leaders who are stepping up and the ones who are continuing to run and be elected into positions, thank you all. Thank you for connecting with us. Make sure you reach out to us when it comes to your questions about engagement and consultation, whether that be industry, whether that be artistry, whether that be filmmaking. We're here to answer your questions. From Leighton, from everybody behind the scenes, from our office, from the Squeaky Wheel, keep the wheel squeaking. The Squeaky Wheel is brought to you by the Squeaky Wheel Company, co-hosted by the President, Lawrence Gervais, from M&A Region 3, and the Captain, Ross Memphis Pambrun. Our program is broadcast from Calgary, in Region 3 of the Métis Nation of Alberta, which is part of the historic Métis Nation homeland. We also acknowledge these lands are the traditional territories of Treaty 7, Blackfoot Confederacy, Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda, with whom we share this land on the basis of our historical and ongoing relationships. You can always reach us for comment about our programming by email at tsw@thesqueakywheel.ca or find us on our website, www.squeakywheel.ca, and our socials. For our comments, it is our focus to recognize all of our First Nations and Indigenous friends, share connection with Métis settlements, and listen to and show respect to our Métis brothers and sisters and families. Here at the Squeaky Wheel, we give thanks to our elders for their guidance and to Mother Earth for her time she allows us to be here and share her bounty. From all of us at the Squeaky Wheel, Tansi.